There are times, I mean, Rami was very concerned, and he would join me in saying this were he here now, about being clumsy and not being cool. Who was this guy who could barely look after the house, who had to be reminded to water the flowers, who didn't really have a sense of humor? And he made a pitch constantly for things he felt he could add to the character. And I would have to counterpitch part of your charm and your vulnerability and what makes you, his phrase, the underestimated hero, is that we keep that pure. You're the amateur.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, a desk jockey seeks revenge against a group of terrorists in director James Hawes' action spy thriller, The Amateur. The film tells the story of Charlie Heller, a brilliant CIA decoder whose world comes crashing down after his wife dies in a London terrorist attack. When his supervisors refuse to act due to conflicting internal priorities, he utilizes his intelligence as the ultimate weapon and travels across the globe to hunt down those responsible. In addition to The Amateur, Hawes' other directorial credits include the features One Life, the movies for television Enid, The Challenger Disaster, and The 39 Steps, and episodes of Slow Horses, Snowpiercer, Black Mirror, Genius, and Doctor Who. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in New York, Hawes spoke with director Sarah Pirozek about filming The Amateur. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Wow, what a ride that was. It was incredible. Can we get another round of applause? I was blown away. So please welcome James Hawes. I've written down a few things here. Okay, well, he's prolific in a few genres, notably his film starring Anthony Hopkins, last 2023, One Life, the whole season of Slow Horses, which is amazing, Black Mirror, Snowpiercer, so many more. And it's really quite incredible to have him here. But his main quality and talent is that he was born in South London. Like me. Anyway, okay.
Wimbledon, to be precise.
Wimbledon. So, what I thought was so satisfying about seeing this film is it's very rare to see a character-driven action movie. And, that comes down to direction, acting, writing, mise en scène, everything coming together. Can you talk about maybe casting first, because it would have just not been what it was without Rami Malek?
I can. What you need to know is that Rami was attached before I was. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the attraction to me was that blend of action and character, and what it says on the tin, The Amateur. And one of my biggest challenges from the beginning and day to day was not to get it cool, not to turn him into some kind of karate kid. He had to stay geeky, clumsy, charming, slightly other, really. And Rami brings that intelligence, that vulnerability that is so important, right. An intensity and an intelligence. You needed to believe that this guy really was an analyst with an IQ of 175. So all those qualities were absolutely key, and then how we kept them and mapped them through his mission.
And was Rachel also attached?
No.
So and they knew each other, right?
They'd met each other a few times, yes. I'm a huge fan of Rachel, somebody else who has that extraordinary intelligence, such an energy. And again, a challenge for a filmmaker in this script is that you only have 2.5 scenes with them together. So you need to get in the belief in this relationship, in what's at stake, in what he's about to lose, that they are viable as a couple for the rest of their lives very quickly. And Rachel brought that partnership.
Yeah, I mean, the humanity and the intimacy that I felt, and it was just a few scenes, I'm just playing them back, it was very palpable and believable and centered. There was like a real centeredness to it. And you need to allow the actors to find that place. Can you talk a little bit about how they rehearsed, how you rehearsed them?
Yeah, I mean, what I always do is I spend table time, first of all, and I do it with each individual actor. And I mean hours it was days with Rami, just going through the script, talking about the temperature of each scene. Where is he emotionally at a given point? What is the backstory? What do we think his day-to-day is with Sarah before this all unfolds? And then I would add in Rachel, and we'd start to play through those scenes. So never putting moves on it, but having the emotional map.
And do you draw, like, we're in the DGA here, so there are a lot of directors and people obviously in production here. Do you draw a map that you then kind of an emotional heat map that you give to your AD, or
no,
you just refer to it?
I refer to it. I mean, I do copious shot lists, and at the top of each scene, I have a paragraph. I'm giving away trade secrets. Maybe we should share. Of what the mood and the message and the beats are I want to get in that scene. They're more important than the shots, but it makes the first feel better if I've got a shot list as well. But that's part of it, and those will be born out of what we've come up with in the rehearsal.
And then, of course, as you say, things come at you when you're in production. Did anything bubble up performance-wise or intention-wise or motivation-wise with the actors that kind of threw you for a loop a little bit, where you said, okay, I need to steer the boat back onto course, or I'm going to allow it to go a different way?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is inspirational and people do great things. Let me give you a moment with Lawrence Fishburne in the scene where he comes into the barracks room and tells Hella, "You're not a killer." He came in, and in the first rehearsal, he walked up to Rami and slapped him around the face. That was not rehearsed. Rami was a little bit taken aback. But it was a powerful choice, and then we managed to accommodate it. Stunts were called, and we did it in a slightly different way, but it was powerful. There are times, I mean, Rami was very concerned, and he would join me in saying this were he here now, about being clumsy and not being cool. Who was this guy who could barely look after the house, who had to be reminded to water the flowers, who didn't really have a sense of humor? And he made a pitch constantly for things he felt he could add to the character. And I would have to counter pitch, you're the amateur. Part of your charm and your vulnerability and what makes you, his phrase, the underestimated hero, is that we keep that pure.
Yeah, no, the slap scene shocked me, and his reaction to it was shocking.
Now you know why.
I do. It was very real. He was just pulling on the first time, and no one called anyone's agents and said, storming off set. Oy, that's very frightening. And Lawrence Fishburne too. Let's talk about him. What a great pair, because there are quite a few couples in this film with Rami, and affectionate, emotional couples, and his affection with Lawrence Fishburne is so mythic in a way. The father giving the approval of the son in a way, but then he's killed the father, he thinks, and so yes, it's a very mythic feel. And they're such great opposites because of the physicality of them, but the intelligence of them is matched, the intense intelligence. Can you talk about the first time they were in the room together doing a read through?
Yeah, and it's partly because you hire Lawrence, and I've said this a couple of times, but if he walks into the room, you're not sure if he's going to hug you or break your neck. And that duality is fantastic. He intimidates. He intimidates other actors in a useful way. What I loved about those two characters is they also have a journey. You see Hendo's growing respect for him. He was never called Hendo, by the way, before. It turns out that Lawrence had a friend who was a Marine who'd been nicknamed Hendo, who finds his way into the movie. And worth also saying that the other end of the script, the scene where he turns up in the parking lot, was not in the original script. That's additional photography. And that's because we so enjoyed the relationship between the two, and we felt it needed to land somewhere and give us that satisfaction to walk away from.
That's the word that keeps coming up for me with this film. It was so satisfying. And
Right.
one of the reasons too is the DP, Martin Roon, who I know did some great work on The Agency, and I admired his work. And then when I saw that he had shot this, I was thrilled to come and see it because I had not seen this before today. So I had no prepared real questions. So I was upstairs making little notes. Apologies to the balcony. Can you talk about working? You haven't worked with him before.
No, I hadn't. I'd seen, particularly one film he'd done was The American, which was an Anton Corbijn directed film.
Amazing.
Starring George Clooney. And that was the beginning of his relationship with George, for whom he has basically been cinematographer and co-director and a couple of things since. I loved the style he brought to it. I love how character focused it was. It had a very particular smell and feel. And I thought that sensibility would be perfect for this.
Was it difficult because you hadn't worked with him before? Because you had so many set pieces to achieve. Was it difficult working with a DP you hadn't worked with before? Or did you find a shorthand quickly? Or
honestly, bluntly, it wasn't quick. But part of the process we'd go to our own inspirations. We'd pull shots. We'd have meetings. We'd have a tabletop that built the palette of both lighting and shot ideas. We talked in detail about how the camera moved. You will probably have noticed that the camera is pretty static and formal in the first act. And then as Hella starts to go on the move and on training, it becomes much more kinetic and it's always at his shoulder. Those were very deliberate decisions made. I thought Martin just did a beautiful job in giving each place an atmosphere. So if you went into a dive bar in Marseille, it felt different to the rave bar, and each country had a slightly different temperature. That was very deliberate, without giving Istanbul a golden glow, which I got thanked for by several Turkish people the other day. It was the first time in years they'd seen a film in Istanbul that didn't show it with the blue mosque and golden sunlight.
Absolutely beautiful and seamless. I really felt like, as I said, I was on a ride and I felt just pulled through on a string. That is just the most, I think, the biggest compliment you can give an action film, because I was just satisfied emotionally and it took me to the end. Can you talk about, because within that you had so many set pieces, for example, the swimming pool. That was so much.
We'll come to the pool, but I mean, obviously that's a huge compliment you're paying, and anybody will know this. I think the key was making sure you traveled with the character. And I did as we go. A film at best is an organic thing, and you could feel that you needed to spend what I call headspace time. And some of those glancing shots down the side of his face at the computer, or catching him alone in the shower, were bits we picked up as we went. They weren't in the script. Shot. But they were just things that we realized we needed emotionally to stay anchored with him. And it is a difficult film to pace. So credit as well to my editor, John Amos, who spent a lot of time with me just working out what the pacing of that was. The swimming pool, I mean, my general rule about set pieces is they can suck so much production time. You have to give it, but you have to also protect the time for two people on a beach or two people in a bar. We went through considerable plans. Obviously, it was location-led. Luck would have it that location is in London, so we could visit it often. London was our base. I did a detailed storyboard quite early on, worked with the VFX producer, supervisor, and we then developed an animatic of what we thought it would be. There was some debate about whether it finished with enough bang, and there's this story tension. I mean, at one point there was an animatic that had all that stuff hit the ground, and cafe roofs were shattered, and cars got swept away on the tide. But then you needed to say, well, hang on, now Hella's killing people all over the place. It's not so focused. How do we do that? How do we give the studio its bang without destroying half the population of central Madrid?
And destroy your sympathy for our character.
Yeah, that too. That's a narrative tension as well. The key to that, and the key to all the VFX I think that I do, is we have a big practical element. So the location, obviously we filmed there. We did the first pull, the suck back on Mark Risman's character, Blazic, in location. He was rigged across the top of the pool and sucked towards the side. Then we built a large section of that pool. on a very particular day. It was the day the SAG strike began. And we did 2 drops. So you got the moment again of him being tucked back and going the first few meters. And then we pulled him clear. And we also did big water tips and built some of the set where the impact hit at the bottom so that you got all that interactivity, and we gave the VFX team a lot to build from rather than starting from scratch.
No, it felt very organic, and it was a very striking moment. The prep process, we've talked about that quite a bit. I think I'd like some questions from the audience. If you guys have some questions, this is such an exciting film. We have time for that. Does anyone have a question? I have more, but I feel like I'm taking up a lot of space about, here we go, sir, yes. So the question is, I'll paraphrase it. The scene where Rami is in bed with his Russian agent, there is a pacing element to it that is so subtle and so well done because you know you're going to be sucked back into the action. How do you make the decisions around doing that?
I mean, I have to give credit to Katrina Balfe as well. That I'm going to work backwards into your answer. On that day, I went up to her and hugged her and said, look, I knew you were going to be great, but that was freaking fantastic. We'd rehearsed, we'd talked about the poignancy and that there was this relationship with 2 souls who had both got such damage, were carrying such dark pasts from their grief, and how that worked. And it is the pause. And I often challenge actors to take that pause longer and longer. I can always squeeze it in the edit, but I want them to stretch it until it's almost uncomfortable. Because I know if we've reached that precipice, then you here are feeling it too. So it was exactly taking that. I think it's also about the way we shot it. We put that camera right in close, so it's almost in overs. So you get the intimacy. It's not a moment to be clear and in the air and just full in the face. You want to feel the proximity of the other person. It's about keeping it simple.
Also, there are those private moments that you talked about, Rami in the shower and all those just settling, anchoring moments. And then there were these huge moments, the opening, the St. Pancras thing, the locations. Can you talk about what it took to shut down St. Pancras and work there?
Yeah, I mean, that was big. And they were scared initially because we're creating a terror situation. So what's this going to be like for their guests and passengers and brand? In fact, the start of Slow Horses was written in the novel to take place at the Eurostar station, at King's Cross station, and they refused us permission, which is why it ended up at an airport instead. Somehow the airport was less worried about the terrorists. I take my hats off to a location and production team because the negotiations were considerable. We had to be out of there before 6 a.m., before the travel was done, so it was spread over a number of days. What helped us there was the conceit. I wanted to shoot everything on dash cams and body cams and iPhones. So obviously we were much lighter on our feet. And it was fun. We gave 24 cameras to the crew. There was a competition each day for who would get the best shot. And you'd put them around as passengers, as passers-by in places that somebody might be with a camera. We'd bring CCTV, but it felt that was where solving a logistical problem had a creative end, which is it feels like how we see things these days, how we receive our news so often is via social media or by somebody walking in the street who points an iPhone. And it also gave the pieces of the puzzle to Charlie Heller to put together. The simple, boring P word comes back, it's planning. So we tracked a route right through the hotel and the station. Obviously, we had a lot of police outside to convince passers-by that we were just filming and not a real incident for them to intervene. And other incidents, what should we talk about? Maybe in Paris, where we had to close down a fairly major intersection for the knockdown of Gretchen. And obviously that's several passes to get the different elements to put together for that shock scare, and then Rami running down the street.
Yeah, I can imagine everyone in Paris at their windows watching, and you're saying, don't look in the camera. Does anyone else have a question or a comment? Yes, sir. So I'm going to summarize that a little bit. So it's there's a question about the screens and how you appreciated seeing all the screens and the use of the screens and telling the story with them, and sort of how it was achieved creatively and with the paintbrush of the director. Yes?
It's a very good question. It's something that obviously went right through post, because you're right. You've got a guy with an IQ of 175. You don't want sort of kindergarten graphics. I was taught in the school of Charlie Brooker on Black Mirror, who is an utter genius when it comes to this. And it's the tension you've just come up with. It's also making them feel rooted. Most CIA interfaces are really boring. And most CIA and other intelligence organization offices look like call centers. They're really dull. So again, finding that space and that interface and that graphic that was practical, believable, but just had enough sexiness that it was going to be visually interesting. Where we could play more was when we went into what we call the vault, and we nudged it into the near future with all the putting together of the pieces that he did. The other thing I did was I then shot it off screen, which scared the hell out of the production manager. But deep in the edit, once we got all those graphics made, we spent 5 days with a detailed shot list shooting those graphics at angles off screen. So you got some more texture into it, some more macro detail, so that it's not 2D flat and boring. And I would recommend that every time if you've got this much tech in it. It was scary to think that a lot of Charlie's story is about the tech. So how do we give that life?
Yeah, and I never felt bored watching screens. Did you? I just felt like it worked. It led me through the story very much so. Okay, I have one very silly question. I'm going to go to you after the silly question. I couldn't read what was written on the puzzle. Oh, well, I was way in the back.
Okay. Oh God, now I've got to remember. Do you mean the compass?
Yes.
To find your way in the clouds.
Ah, very nice.
I'm not sure I've got that quite the right. Somebody will remember better than I. Thank you. That's what you're here for. Thank you very much.
So you don't get lost in the clouds. Yeah. Love it. Sir, in the back, did you have any communication with the author in pre-production?
I did not. The producers had. They'd been developing it at 20th for quite a while. He is a 91 or 92-year-old gentleman now, lives in France. We were in communication with him during the run-up to the release, which he was excited about, as you can imagine, something you've written in 1981, getting another life. But they'd handled that all much earlier in the process. Yeah, there's a lot that we pulled from the novel, including details like the guinea fowl outside the house. That's a detail. In the book, Inqualine is actually outside of Prague, in a remote area down by a river, and their escape, which was written in the novel and in the script when I came along, was through a root cellar down to a rowboat onto the river, where they were then pursued by Russian special forces in motorized boats. My director, Maths, told me that this was going to be a very short chase. And I'd already moved us from Prague to Istanbul because I thought that would be much more contemporary, more current. Prague used to be a city of spies in the Cold War. Now you're more likely to get run over by bachelorettes on a beer bike. So this was a way of, so that was a detail I'm giving you. We've translated, but so, yeah, there's quite a lot. The Inqualine character is called differently. Oh, one other little nugget maybe from the first version of the film, an actress called Mart Keller, who was known from, somebody's nodding at the back and knows very well. Mart Keller was known for Marathon Man and was longtime partner of Al Pacino. And I'd worked with her a couple of years ago on One Life. And I realized that she'd played the Inqualine part in the original version of the movie. And so she appears in this film as the flower seller, as just a little cameo and a treat, but just a nugget. Somebody clearly spotted that. Congratulations.
What a lovely Easter egg.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Anyone else? No one else?
Okay.
Is there anything, I always like to ask this, is there anything, having done it all, it's all polished, it's done, it's dusted, do you have a little tiny nagging thing?
Always.
It's just us directors and ADs and PAs here.
Always. And I watched it in the London premiere and there were things I want to change. I mean, we were delayed by the writer's strike. There are things I'd want to tighten in the script. We were interrupted by the actor's strike. We lost some momentum. We had to change locations from Latvia to Istanbul. And there are always things I'd want to be able to redo, but the schedule is the schedule. And sometimes you make a mistake and walk away. You must all know that feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it felt flawless to me. And I have to say, it was such a pleasure seeing a story being lifted up about brains beating brawn, particularly these days. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.